Can I record it? All right, there we go. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's panel on housing justice. This panel is hosted by Falcons Rising, which is a faculty-driven committee inspired by the Black Lives Matter movement that aims to bring meaningful, sustainable reforms that address Cerritos College student experiences with racial inequity. I'm Joy Suhako of the Sociology Department and proud member of Falcons Rising, and I have the pleasure of introducing our presenters and panelists today. We'd like to acknowledge that we are on the ancestral lands of the Tongva and Gibberellino peoples, and that housing justice is a racial justice issue. To help us understand this more in depth and educate us about current local efforts, we have two housing justice organizers from the LA region with us today who will be giving us an introductory presentation on the topic. So from Keep LA House, we have Maria Lopez. Welcome. And from Long Beach Residents Empowered or LIBRE, we have Maria Fernanda. Welcome to you both. Thank you so much for being here. And if you need, I think you should have share screen ability if you need that during the presentation. And so I'll let you both take it away.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maria Fernanda. I am a community organizer for Long Beach Residents Empowered. I was born and raised in Long Beach, and I've been a renter my entire life. LIBRE works to ensure access to affordable housing, renter protections, and community economic development so that we can end displacement and homelessness and ensure housing is a human right. If any of y'all live in Long Beach and you ever find yourself in a difficult housing situation, feel free to reach out to us at any time.
Hi, folks. Nice to meet you all. My name is Maria. I'm undocumented, unafraid, and unapologetic. I am from Mexico, Colima. I migrated to Long Beach at the age of 4, and now I'm the campaign coordinator for the Keep LA House Coalition. And a little bit about us, we're a really fun group. For short, we're CLA. We like to say that we bring out our claws to fight for housing and tenants because that's really what it takes. Keep LA House is a coalition of tenants, tenant right advocates, public interest lawyers, and community-based organizations working together to ensure that all tenants across Los Angeles County have a right to affordable, secure, and habitable housing free from harassment and displacement. You'll see our work in LA County and in LA City. Pass it over to you.
So when we talk about housing in Long Beach, there's a lot of stuff that shaped us and the way that we live today. So in the 1920s and the 1940s, there were racially restrictive covenants. Racially restrictive covenants were contractual agreements that prohibited the purchase, lease, or occupation of property by people of color. There were white-only areas around Long Beach, including East Long Beach, Bixby Knolls, the Virginia Country Club, and this entire city of Lakewood. There in 1934 through 1968, there was something called redlining, and this is what really shaped housing in Long Beach and continues to influence it, although it is not currently practiced anymore. The Federal Housing Administration, or FHA, and private banks implemented redlining, the practice of denying or limiting financial loans to certain neighborhoods based on their racial composition. So if you were Black, if you were brown, anything, if you were not white, you would not be able to get a loan to purchase or obtain property. And if you can see in the map, I'm sorry. If you could see in the map previously, there were a lot of different zones that were considered what was secure in the city, safe areas and neighborhoods. And there were a lot of areas within the city of Long Beach that were considered undesirable. So Yellow areas were considered risky neighborhoods for investment, and red areas made it hazardous for lending, making it extremely difficult for people of color to buy homes and generate wealth. So we could see a history of redlining and how that has obviously shaped how we live in Long Beach today. Around 2012 and 2016, you could see the more poor neighborhoods were areas where marginalized communities were allowed to purchase land. And it caused a lot of displacement. As you could see, the darker blue areas consist of where the majority of people of color live today in Long Beach, which they were completely pushed off. And you can see that the majority of folks were pushed out to basically the Long Beach and Compton border. So there's renter and owner occupied housing units from 1980 to 2020 for Black and African Americans. If you can see, the majority of Black renters in Long Beach have been completely marginalized in where they live currently. In the 1980s, you can see that there were a lot of folks that lived more in central Long Beach, the downtown areas, and we can see how far they've been displaced out of the actual city and further into areas like close to Paramount, mostly in North Long Beach and the Compton border. Next slide, please.
This is the homeowner slide, very similar.
So sorry. Yeah, so as we could see also that the majority of homeowners in Long Beach, there really aren't many. And we can continue to see that today, that we were only able to buy a home in North Long Beach. So where is housing actually being built today in Long Beach? So we're seeing a lot of projects in the downtown area, very, very expensive projects, tall buildings like you would see in LA. And this is just an example of one of the buildings that have been recently built in the downtown area. This is what's considered to be one of the nicer neighborhoods in Long Beach. And this, if you could see on the left-hand side of the screen, is one of the cheapest units that are inside of this building, which is $3,396. Very close to $4,000 for only 700 square feet of a unit. Obviously, not a lot of people here in Long Beach can afford something like that. And obviously, while it is a great place to live because of the area, very desirable, this isn't something that a lot of renters can afford. When we look at the other side of the coin on what affordable housing actually looks like in the city, what most of the renters and the conditions of where they actually live in, this is a reality that a lot of renters are facing. Definitely very different to the photo you have seen before. The units are much smaller, less taken care of, because as we talked about in earlier slides, these are less desirable areas that where we see a lot of marginalized communities living in Central Long Beach and the North Long Beach area. There's roach infestations, there's rat infestations, landlords that are not taking care of the unit. And this is what affordable housing looks like. This is what the majority of renters in the city actually live like. And we can see that it doesn't matter if you're in very, very low income housing in Section 8, or if you're renting on the regular market, the living conditions are the same. So here's a map of the rent prices in Long Beach between 2010 and 2020. Rent prices in Southern California are only projected to increase, which means that affordability is moving further out of reach from renters and their families. If we look at rent in 2010, renter-heavy areas or Northwest and Central and Downtown Long Beach had rents that were between $1,000 to $1,300, but 10 years later in 2020, the average rent prices were about $1,600 or more, yet wages have not increased, and at the same time and at the same rates that rent have. Families find it increasingly difficult to afford where they can live and are eventually forced to move out of Long Beach, and sometimes out of the state itself. Maria, I'll pass things over to you.
All of these conditions have really brought people together. There's always a notion or a thought that you're closer to homelessness than you are closer to being a millionaire, or you have more life experiences similar to someone who is unhoused and someone who is a multimillionaire. And so people throughout all of Long Beach have been uniting for years because this has been happening and it's kind of been increasing. And so people are either stepping along with their fear of all of these multitude of things, but mainly losing their homes, or stepping out of that because they know that even when they don't fight, they lose their homes. And so we've been able to meet some very incredible people here in the city of Long Beach, and organize with them and help them build what we know now as a Long Beach Tenants Union, in partnership with LIBRE, because the Long Beach Tenants Union is really just on the ground directly with folks, and Myra and LIBRE bring in the resources and somewhat of a structure for us to hold on to. And so I'm going to cover right now resistances and community wins, which is very important, as we know that policy replicates itself or bad energy replicates itself. We hope that in light of struggles of our ancestors and our past, right now in the month of March, we're celebrating women of color. We're also celebrating Cesar Chavez. And so in all of that mist, we hope that hope replicates itself and that you get inspired to really go on the ground, wherever you live, near this community college, to activate yourself, to activate your familia, your neighbors. If you don't know your neighbors, that's number one key. You should know your neighbors. And so with these resistances, and why we call them resistances, is because it's important to know that you're fighting or you're resisting against something that wants to oppress you. And so in 2017 is when the resistances started. They started, I want to say, in my neighborhood in the first district, which is what folks consider downtown. And so the first ever that we saw was Pacific Avenue resistance. They were sadly displaced. Why was there was about only of the 10 units that were being displaced, about 3 to 4 only ended up uniting. And so this is where we show that numbers really count. And it's sad to say that the folks that united were elder folks, were folks with disabilities, who really had nowhere to go at the end of the day. We had an 80-year-old couple who, you know, over the years, that just impacted their mental health. And it was just hard in general. Moving, but because of them, a bigger resistance was built, and it's actually just 2 blocks away from the Pacific resistance. If you know Long Beach, that's on 10th and Pacific. Then we move over a block down to Cedar and 10th, and we had the biggest ever resistance at that time in 2018 of the Cedar resistance, which was 2 neighboring buildings that had all united except for like 1 or 2 tenants. So imagine 8 tenants and 8 tenants here, a total of like 16, a little maybe 14 united, and they all ended up winning in court. So they pushed it all the way to court, ended up winning significant money to relocate. Some of them are still in the city of Long Beach, now in the north side, right? So you're either in the downtown north side or in the west side if you live in Long Beach. And then the Harbor Resistance, which is in the west side, the first ever resistance that was built in the west side, they wanted to just vacate because of their poor housing and maintenance repairs in the building. And so I did end up helping them. So there was a $500 rent increase at the time, which was illegal, and we fought against it. So they didn't pay that rent increase for 5 months. So if you accumulate those 5 months, they won a pretty good $1,000 or so, a little bit more than that, and then ended up winning another $3,000 in court with the guidance of Basta that I was able to get them. And so, yeah, at the end of the day, they did have to move out, but they didn't move out without having financial help. And so I think sometimes that's the biggest thing, the economic. And these 3 resistances that I'm about to highlight have been with us since 2019. And by us, I mean Long Beach Tenants Union and LIBRE co-organizing. And some folks are missing here, but in the past, Long Beach Forward has also provided support for this. But these 3 resistances really came out October, November of 2019. If you remember this, this time is when we were all talking about the state is going to pass a Tenant Protection Act. And so the state's going to pass this. All the landlords are like, let's evict people who have low rent, just like wipe them out. And so they attempted to do this to all these 3 buildings, the 64th Resistance, which is on the north side of Long Beach. And these are 2 buildings adjacent to each other, kind of like the Cedar Resistance. So we're seeing patterns built here for landlords. Their landlord is a multi-millionaire landlord. They are all still in their building, with an exception of 2 of them. One of them started working for the property management company, and the other one broke the union and got legally evicted. So that's what happens when people break the union. It's a really hard cost because the union is so powerful. And we the organizers are also the union because we're tenants here in the city of Long Beach. But in our union, everyone has the same speaking credentials, et cetera, because we believe everyone's experience is important. The Daisy Resistance and the Orange Resistance have the same landlord. Funny enough, the Daisy Resistance came to us. I actually know them. They're a block away from my house that way. And some of them I grew up with their like children and or families' children from middle school and so on. So this neighborhood is really tied. And with that being said, all of these 3 buildings are still in place and are still winning and have helped us win many policy changes here in the city of Long Beach, beginning with the first ever COVID eviction moratorium and moving on forward to anti-tenant harassment policies, et cetera. But I'm going to go ahead and move us forward. Next slide, please. And with that, our panel discussion.
All right, so to help facilitate this, we were going to bring in Victoria Figueroa, who is the marketing director of the Sociology Club, as well as Jayani Davkota, who is the president of the Sociology Club and helped to organize this event. So if you ladies are ready to go ahead and begin your questioning, feel free to unmute yourself.
Hi guys. As she said, I am Jayani. I'm the president of Sociology Club and one of the moderators for today's panel.
Hi everyone. My name is Victoria. I am the digital marketing rep, as Professor Suhako said, of the Sociology Club.
Thank you, Maria and Maida, for that wonderful presentation. It was very insightful and conveyed important information worth knowing about. We appreciate the work that LIBRE does to help these issues in their community and advocate for justice. Moving forward, we wanted to share some of our own research regarding the housing crisis across California community colleges, particularly Cerritos College. And I'll pass it on to Victoria to start us off.
According to the 2019 #Real College survey report conducted by the Hope Lab across California, nearly 1 in 5 community college students experience homelessness. As defined by the study, homelessness includes living situations such as couch surfing, living in a car or motel, or living outside. Housing insecurity is a circumstance that makes losing permanent housing more likely, such as missing a rent payment or living in an overcrowded environment.
Some statistics include that 55% of Cerritos College respondents identified as being housing insecure and had difficulty paying rent or a mortgage. Additional research suggests students who experience homelessness and food insecurity also find it difficult to meet a variety of competing needs, including management of personal and financial responsibilities and navigating college environments. Also, 65% of students at Cerritos College experienced at least one of these forms of basic needs insecurity in the past year. 46% of Cerritos College respondents experienced food insecurity within 30 days prior to taking the survey. 16% of Cerritos College students who responded say they utilize Supplemental Nutritional Assistant Program, which is SNAP benefits. Only 6% of homeless students utilize housing benefits. And finally, 15% of Cerritos College respondents experienced homelessness in the previous year.
The 2019 #Real College survey report identified student populations that are at higher risk for homelessness, including foster youth, Black, Native American, Southwest Asian, Pacific Islander, Asian American, and undocumented students. Homelessness is a persistent problem across California's 115 community college campuses. Several factors make housing and homelessness especially significant, including rising tuition, lack of affordable housing, and financial aid that doesn't cover the cost of food, gas, childcare, and more. Many students are also reluctant to seek help, keeping them from finding stable shelter.
So now we wanted to get started with the questions. So my first question to the panelists are, what are the issues related to housing you are seeing across Los Angeles County?
Do you want to go first, Maria, or do you want me to go?
Since it's county, I'll go, and then you can chime in for Long Beach at least. That'd be great. I'm really shocked with those with that data. I got chills because yes, students also face homelessness and being unhoused and the dangers of being unhoused ever so more than other folks. But in regards to what we are seeing in the county is exactly what you're saying, right? Like we're seeing a lot of harassment because folks have rent debt and they're unable to pay this rent debt back, right? So the creative ways that landlord go into getting this money back is into harassing them, into making them live in substandard housing. So if they owe some sort of rent debt or have rent debt, they say, well, you haven't really paid your rent. How do you expect me to do the repairs? As if the state doesn't have a law that says, hey, you have to provide habitable housing. And so that's one of the things that we're seeing also leading folks into being unhoused and homelessness. Another thing is that folks cannot what's the easiest way to say it? We need non-payment protections because people cannot afford their rent. We've been saying the rent is too damn high for several years, and now the rent debt is too damn high. And in general, we can't pay the rent debt and pay our rent at the same time, right? And so folks need protections against non-payment of rent for at least 3 months or so because they're trying to recover, right? So folks really, if they cannot pay their rent, are in danger of still being displaced, which after the pandemic makes no sense because we were all economically burdened. We were all economically impacted. And so things that really rely on those types of actions are going to not happen because folks are still impacted and are still trying to come out. What we're seeing on the third point is that folks get when they get displaced, they have limited access to right to counsel, which is an attorney. And so their chances drastically, if not in its totality, 90% plus, right, of tenants that go to court without an attorney lose. And so what does that say for someone that goes through eviction court? So just quickly for folks who don't know, because I'm sure we don't all know this, if you get a DUI, you have access to a public defender, right? So that's an attorney for you that the state, county says, hey, you should have this is essential. Well, when you go to eviction court, that's not necessarily the case. Actually, that's not the case. You don't get a public defender. You are not entitled to an attorney or representation other than yourself. So I've gone to court with tenants, even in the last year, who have to self-represent. And then when they say, hey, the county has these protections, I shouldn't be getting evicted, the judge has to verify that. And in some cases, judges are so overworked and overwhelmed, they don't verify that. So they themselves displace tenants, and then tenants are having to face this tremendous entity and structure of power that is hard to navigate in general as an English speaker. Imagine a monolingual Spanish mujer, right? So I'm going to say that those are the top three that in the county we're seeing widely. So the need for right to counsel, rent debt and harassment, and just in general, non-payment of rent being a still an issue. Fernanda.
And it's the same thing here in Long Beach. Those are currently things that we're actively fighting for as an organization with partners like Maria and other housing justice organizations within the city. Is definitely the need for a right to counsel program to be funded. I have also gone to court with residents, and Maria and myself, we're not attorneys. We can't represent these folks. We can't give legal advice. The best we could do is offer moral support and reinstate, like, this is what the laws are, and use them to your advantage and as a proof for your case. And it's very difficult for us to see that, and having to go through this with residents. And we go very frequently to the court. There's times where I've had to go 3 or 4 times during the week with residents, sometimes even within the same day. And currently there are protections that are actually set to expire on March 31st. And we've already been seeing evictions nonstop, some legal, some illegal, the majority of the time illegal evictions. And we're very, very nervous for what's going to happen once these protections do come to an end. And we don't know where we're going to find the capacity to help all of these tenants. One of the things that we are seeing also in the city of Long Beach as a form of eviction is landlords are trying to influence residents to self-evict without having to go through the legal means to evict a tenant. There's a thing called no fault evictions, and then there's something called just cause evictions. Just cause evictions fall under, you violated your contract, not paying your rent on time. Obviously, right now, there are protections for not having to pay your rent because of COVID, but that's coming to an end. And that's what some of the residents are facing when Maria talks about currently collecting rent debt, is folks that lost their jobs during the pandemic that have accumulated that rent debt. So what are landlords doing right now by incentivizing residents to self-evict is that they're saying, hey, you know what, we'll offer you $1,000, $2,000 cash for you to sign this document where you're willingly terminating your lease. We'll let you stay in your unit until the end of the month for free. All we're asking for you is to willingly move out, take these $2,000, use them towards a deposit to your new building, and that's it. And a lot of tenants that don't know their rights, unfortunately, run with these $2,000 and they are like, great, $2,000 cash, I'll just move anywhere tomorrow. And the reality of the fact is that $2,000 doesn't even scratch the surface of being able to put in a deposit to a new apartment. So these residents, once they're out, it's like, where am I going to go? A lot of these tenants end up homeless, or sometimes, as the statistics are mentioning, end up couch surfing if they're lucky to have someone that will let them stay in the apartment with them. And the reason why landlords are trying to get residents to self-evict is they'll usually try to do something like substantial remodeling, where they'll beautify the building and then put it at the market at a much, much higher price. To try to make more money. And actually in the city of Long Beach, again, with these county protections, currently there is a ban on those types of evictions. It is a whole process. Residents still have to go through the eviction court to be able to submit it for to be able to be evicted for something that is not their fault. However, they're entitled to $4,800 in relocation assistance, which is something that landlords have to pay out. So on top of getting the residents to self-evict, they don't have to take them to court, which they're saving money on legal fees, and they're also saving time, but they're also skimping out on paying renters what the law says they're supposed to be given, which is $4,800 of rent, or 2 months of rent, whichever one is more. So these are really, really big things that we're currently seeing in the city of Long Beach.
Thank you guys for your insightful responses. My next question is somewhat related to my previous question, but I wanted to ask if you guys can speak specifically to the disproportionate issues faced by the Black community.
Oh yeah, I mean, this is an institution of learning, and so for those purposes, you know, structural racism and structural discrimination it is still in play in many of our policies, is still in play in many of our county entities, although we're getting somewhere, right? And we're recognizing the harms of discrimination and racism in America. Going back to the numbers of rent debt, let me see here, can I have sharing screen abilities? So I'm going to show you all some data. Can folks see that, or should I zoom in more? Let me zoom in per section here. Let's see if this is possible. Okay, so according to the National Equity Atlas here, this is the rent debt in America, right? And so I'm just going to focus on some really big key points here, right? That pretty much our Black and Brown communities are a part of, but in particularly our Black folks who are targeted again and again. And so in this question, those behind on rent are overwhelmingly low-income households who experience job loss and income losses during the pandemic. 72% of those were people of color. 41% of those were already unemployed. 77% of those are low income, and 53% of those are households with children. But if we go down here, right, Black, Latinx, Native American, and other renters of color were disproportionately housing insecure before the pandemic. And our biggest two numbers here are Black and Latinx folks, right? 43% Black folks being already housing insecure, and 46% being our brown brothers and sisters. When you go over here and we talk about rental assistance, right? Most renters with arrears, which is debt, have not yet applied for assistance and or are waiting for a response. And so did these programs actually reach out to the folks necessary? And did the folks necessary receive those assistances? Well, sad to say, we're at a very low 12% of folks that receive the actual help from these emergency rental assistance program, and some that are still waiting, and it's been a year, 2 years, some that have been denied by the state, which there is now a lawsuit against, because they should have been given due process but weren't. And then 72% of our comrades that just could not apply, right? Whether that's because of other forms of redlining, right? Language access, paperwork in hefty proof. So like having to prove that like you get all of these benefits, et cetera, undocumented folks. How did they, or were they able to receive this help, right? And so all of these things come into play. I'm going to exit this one to really show you the data on LA County. So I'm going to highlight this. In LA County specifically, and this is total households, approximately behind on rent are 182,000 homes, okay, households. The total estimate rent debt that the county has is approximately 648 million. Okay. And then rent debt per household, approximately, we would say that each household owes about $3,600 right now. And the children that live in these households that are backed up on rent, so these are the amount of children that live in these households, is about 201. That's 201,000. No, someone help me with this number. Yeah, 200. Go, Joey.
201,800.
Children. Okay. And so these children are being impacted, and their families are being impacted by rent debt. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. But pretty much rent debt is all our people of color, mainly Black folks. And they deal on and off with a lot of harassment, discrimination, even when they're being evicted, then try to find new housing, then the discrimination occurs once more. So I'm going to go ahead and stop there.
Thank you, guys. And I'll pass it on to Victoria to ask her set of questions.
Hello. So widening the lens a little bit more on what it means to create and preserve affordable housing. Would you guys please speak more about community land trust and what that means?
Of course, I can go ahead and take that. So at LIBRE, we're actually in the process of creating Long Beach's first community land trust. It's called the Housing for All Long Beach Community Land Trust. So currently, there are around 350 community land trusts in the United States, and we're working to bring the first one to Long Beach. What is a community land trust? A community land trust removes land from the speculative market for the use of the community. It entails of resident ownership of buildings, homes. It provides security, equity, and inheritance rights. There's a 99-year ground lease that ensures exclusive use of the land and continued affordability through resale price restrictions. It entails community ownership of the land. It ensures community interests in rebuilding affordability, protection from speculators, and common uses. So community members come together to decide how the land gets used. And why should we pursue community land trusts, especially in areas like Long Beach? Communal lands and community land trusts are strategies for supporting our low-income communities and communities of color. They resist displacement through creating opportunities for safe and affordable housing. We establish democratic, popular control over decisions affecting their neighborhoods and offer services and installations that are currently not offered by market rate housing. Currently in the market, it's very, very hard for marginalized communities to be able to purchase a piece of land or get something that they can call their own. As we have seen in the maps that we showed earlier, is redlining it's thanks to redlining that has shaped the way that marginalized communities are able to purchase homes or land within the city. And a lot of folks end up really being displaced almost from the entire state to be able to obtain something for themselves. And with the community land trust, we are able to reduce the cost of how much a home or an apartment unit will actually cost, and really start getting that idea of land back to those that it was stolen from, like Tongva communities or marginalized community like Black and African American communities.
Thank you so much. Our next question is if you guys can please speak more about rent control.
Absolutely. We want everyone to talk about rent control. Some folks call it rent stabilization. But yes, the rent is still too damn high for us. We need not just rent control, we need a rent deduction. If we're being realistic, we want better neighborhoods, same neighbors, to be honest, because this is what really makes Long Beach strong, or any city strong, any county strong, which is its tenants that fortify every business, even the city with parking tickets. Don't get me started. We really are the essence and the heart of every city. But why is rent control important? Rent control stops evictions, point blank. How? Well, we believe that when folks are able to afford their rent, they're able to stay in place. And it really comes down to that. It's not about, the economics don't work because this Stanford report came out. And again, Stanford is a structure that is elitist, that currently and most times always practiced white supremacy in their structure and studies and curriculum. And so, there is landlords out there saying rent control does not work because it doesn't benefit me. And I'm going to bust some really quick myths about rent control. And the reality is that rent control does work. It also still, even then, at some point, gives landlords profit. Let me tell you why. Because one, you're still getting my rent. And then if you're still able to increase my rent 3%, that's still a 3% bonus for you on top of what you already get in the state. Because guess what? Ding, ding, ding. Landlords get tax reductions, right? And they get taxes back to them because they're landlords and they're providing, this said housing. And that percent is about 13% back to them of their tax money. And so if you add that 13% with whatever, the state right now considers allowable, which is 10%, actually. And I'm going to break that down. Why 10%? It's 5% plus the CPI. And we see the CPI right now is skyrocketing, right? And so it's 5% plus the CPI, but it's capped at the maximum of 10%. And that, if you need that, is the Tenant Protection Act of, I believe, 2020, which is AB 1482. And so that is still outrageous. 10%, no one can pay that. In 2018, LA Times came out with an article saying that all throughout LA County, if you got a 2% rent increase, about 5,000 people were already in the verge of displacement. And so with that being said, imagine how many folks now with a rent increase are in the verge of displacement. And so rent control works for the purposes of what it's needed for, which is to control rent increases and to keep people housed and to keep rents affordable to where those folks can pay it. The other myth, or just to clearly clarify that landlords would say, I don't get a profit. You are always guaranteed a profit, whether that is the maximum one you want or the one that the law dictates, right? but that's still a profit. So profit is a profit in your sense, or in our sense, because you're still profiting off of us. And at the end of the day, we need more than rent control, right? Like we need strong rent control. I think that all cities should be capping it at 2%. Anything higher is still, putting tenants at risk. And so, Myra, I welcome you to talk about rent control too.
Yeah, absolutely. And while in the city of Long Beach, there is no rent control, there is something that we're also actively fighting for. And we're definitely going to be having a lot stronger conversations around the subject. We were recently on the call with the Board of Supervisors, trying to get some extensions on some of these protections. And a lot of landlords actually had a lot to say in terms of the protection, saying how they were very affected in terms of being able to make money, that, they also had to think about paying their mortgages, not just paying, like, they understand that the burdens that renters have because they also have to pay. And it's things like that. And one of the biggest ones that stuck with me is there was one man that came up to speak who was representing one of the landlord associations, and he was saying that during the pandemic and during the time that these protections were in place, that their cost of operations went up 14%. When during the entire pandemic, even with protections in place, renters' rent were going up 10% every month, or every year. So during those 3 years, we were literally paying more than what their entire cost of operation went up. So we are currently fighting to make sure that we have a strong rent control in place, not just for our city, but throughout LA County.
Yes, and back to this quote of Asada Shakur, which talks about how structural police and landlords go hand in hand, right? And they protect each other. They're also allowed to lie to you. Police is allowed to lie to you. And so landlords will also use that tactic of lying to you, right? And so it's important to note and see that rent control is legal and it's winnable. And all these cities, I put it in the chat, but recently, this past year, if not still in the fight right now, is Pasadena. Pasadena won rent control. Pomona won rent control. Bell Gardens, closest to you all, won rent control, and is still fighting to also uphold it. And also Cudahy won a rent freeze recently and have extended it. So like shout out to them for really, putting in that work. Oh, and I see Irma from Norwalk. Nice to see you, Irma. We'll get your hand right now. I return it back to the students.
Yeah, so thank you guys so much for not only enlightening us, but inspiring us about this subject. We're going to pass it back on to Jayani for our final question.
Actually not the final question, but second to last. So we would love it if you guys could share some light on the development of mixed income housing and what it means in terms of density.
May you repeat that for me? I just got the density piece.
Yeah, could you share light on the development of mixed income housing and what it means in terms of density?
Mixed income housing is something fairly new within the last, I want to say 3 to 5 years. The development of it in regards to density sometimes is pretty heavy. Density meaning that there's a lot of folks being rammed or crammed into this building, right? And sometimes because we need we believe in the power of community care and social housing, and we do need to take care of one another and care for one another because we do it best, to be precise, right? But sometimes the structures at B and also the policies that exist in regards to density in the state, because the state does give you what is called a density bonus. And so the state incentivizes density. So the state is like, hey, everyone in every city here is like backed up on their affordable housing numbers. That's actually a thing. Every city has a certain amount of affordable housing units that they have to meet by the end of the year. Long Beach has been backed up for the past 7 years, not meeting any of our numbers. And now the state is actually getting involved and forcing Long Beach to provide, I think, 5,000 to 7,000 affordable units. But going back to density, the state really, really loves density because they think that with density, we're going to solve these issues. And reality is that sometimes, yes, but that's not the case. And it's not a full answer to our issues. Social housing is in the form that it's built with the manner of tenants' needs and insights and also input in this process, right? We see some in LA that are struggling right now. I think there was a fire in one of these social mixed housing buildings. And so there's some issues there. And so we've been able to see from their experiences these things of density and stuff. But in regards to how they're being built, yes, there will be a high amount of number tenants in the buildings. They will be probably 2 to 3 story buildings for the most part. And also the state is incentivizing urban or rural areas. Rural, I think it's rural, where there's a lot of single family homes. They're giving the density bonus now to single family homes, that they're able to create a unit up on top to house folks. But YIMBYs exist, not in my backyard, or NIMBYs. And so that has not really gotten famous, let's say, as a tactic to really build housing to house our unhoused folks, and in general, folks who cannot afford a high rent. That's all I got on that subject matter, but we can always be learning more.
So finally, now to close this Q&A portion of the panel, I wanted to ask what it's like being an organizer in this work.
Where to begin, right? There's so many emotions when it comes to being in this type of work. It's fulfilling, I'd say, is one of them. Being able to serve your communities in a different way, being able to prevent that displacement. There's no feeling like it, it's like knowing like this person gets to keep their roof over the head because we fought together for it. And that's a feeling unlike no other, knowing that someone's going to be sleeping sound over there in their room, in their house, and they get to have that safety and that security. So it's fulfilling in that sense, but it is very, very difficult because a lot of the times it doesn't have that happy ending. It has, this idea where there's times where there's literally nothing we can do, and we can't prevent that displacement. And there's a lot of stories that I carry close to my heart from folks that while they fought with tooth and nail and everything that they had, they ended up being displaced. And it's difficult to see that. It's very hard and there's this very fine line balance when it comes to mental health and doing this type of work, because you really absorb a lot, and as much as you try not to, you can't help absorbing this type of situations. And this is why we fight so hard in our cities. This is why we fight so hard with council members and at legislative meetings, because overall we're the ones that are on the ground. We are seeing this not just as renters ourselves, like myself and Maria, who know what the constant struggle is of dealing with harassing landlords, of our houses being sold and eventually get tried to pushed out of our units, but we're also seeing it with renters that are actively going through it as well, that may not be as lucky to be as informed as we are. And that is our job, to try to inform them. And sometimes it's too late, or there really is nothing that we can do at this point. And just being able to find out that fine line of being okay with losing sometimes is the hardest thing in our job, being okay with losing, because a lot of the times it will happen.
And in some cases, that loss also comes with learning, you know, lessons. I became an organizer because the systems told me, hey, you're undocumented, you're poor, yeah, I don't know where you're gonna get. And so I was like, what? Can you say that again? Because I didn't hear it and I don't believe it. So I graduated with my bachelor's in Chicano Latino Studies from Cal State Long Beach in 2017. And people kept asking me, like, at that time I was already organizing, but people were still asking me, like, what are you gonna do with that major? You know, because I'm gonna say it like that, because, you know, most people who came up to me and told me that were white women and white men. Like, what are you gonna do with that major? And in my head, I'm like, it's an open-ended major. I can do anything I want with this major. It's all just based on experience. And pretty much, I want to say that this job, or being an organizer, challenges you to become your highest self. And why do I say that? It's because when those hard moments hit of, you know, families against a really hard wall or a sword, right? Contra la espada o la pared, that's what my mom says. It really challenges you to believe in yourself, and in the magic of community, the magic that you held within yourself. And it's important to not let someone tell you otherwise, that it doesn't exist, because it really does exist. Everything we hold to become our highest self in community is already within us. And so we really do have to believe you have to believe in yourself. You have to believe in community. You have to believe that you can become your highest self, which says no, which says I don't have capacity for this, which says, hey, we only organize buildings and here are the resources you need. I wish you luck. And if you did not get those resources, come back and I will pin someone that I directly know so that we can, you know, follow that up. So it really challenges you to have discipline and to put in those boundaries, because, you know, if you're no longer there as community, and they don't have you, who's Maria, who's unafraid, who's bilingual, who can talk to you like she talks to her mom, they're gonna have an LA organizer who doesn't know Long Beach, who is probably a DSA organizer, and at the end of the day, you know, cannot really connect with you in the sense of really organizing in the community and city that you love and that you were raised in. So yeah, I would say definitely believe in yourself, have a structured support of folks who believe in you when you don't have that within you, because, you know, we're human and that happens. And you're gonna need energy too, but that comes with believing in yourself, because, you know, when that trickles, everything else trickles, and you're even able to love more deeply, you're able to give more deeply, and you're able to give more because you're able to take care of yourself and to take care of others. The way you treat yourself is ultimately what you will be giving to community. And so, yeah, I really want to emphasize that to take care of others, you got to take care of yourself. That's all I got.
Yeah. Thank you thank you guys so much for sharing this space with us and providing us with insights about the housing reality that we face today. At this moment, we have ended the Q&A portion, and we're going to pass it on to Maria.
Yes, folks, I'm going to give some shout outs in the next 15 minutes. And then after that, we do have another 15 minutes of unstructured Q&A. So if folks have been waiting to ask some questions or comments, you'll be able to do so at that time. Silvana, may you bring up the presentation? Thanks. All right, folks, in the spirit of county protections being one and now ending, I want to make sure that you know when they're ending and what is ending. So the county in January was able to extend emergency COVID-19 tenant protections up until March 31st, 2023. We're about less than 10 days away from that. This Tuesday, we attempted to get some of these protections, but through the state of emergency on homelessness, because we believe that tenant protections, prevent homelessness. And we were unlucky. We actually just needed one vote and we didn't get it. We had 2 votes yes, 2 votes no, and 1 abstention. And so we were unable to extend or in general pass again some just cause protections for folks. So I want to make sure to let you know what is coming up to an end on March 31st. And so mainly incorporated cities will be impacted. You're going to be losing protections against eviction for non-payment of rent due to COVID. So folks who cannot pay their rent come April 1st, we should really get connected to them. Protections against eviction for housing an unauthorized family, friend, or pet. This is also a big one. And then the third one, last but not least, protection against eviction without cause. So if your city does not have just cause protections, we encourage you to fight for those. Next slide, please. How do we encourage you to fight for those? Well, Keep LA Housed has a campaign within our campaign, I guess, because Keep LA Housed is a campaign. Our main struggle right now is to get a tenant bill of rights through the county. However, the powers of the county are only for unincorporated parts of LA. So that means that their regular non-emergency powers can only cover the areas that they dictate, which are unincorporated areas. So if your city is incorporated, the policies we've been able to pass in the county don't affect you. And I'll talk more about those. But our tenant bill of rights consists of 9 policies. And here you see the website. I don't know if Silvana, may you put that website in the chat for me as well. So Keep LA Housed, tenant bill of rights, 9 policies. 1, rent stabilization. We already talked about it. Rent control, right? That's our number 1 thing. And we hope that folks are able to pass it because it's now in a bundle with other policies, right, that are all essential in stopping evictions and displacement. Universal just cause. I'm going to go over them fast. Limitation on evictions for failure to pay rent. Relocation assistance. Effective tenant harassment protections. Safeguards against buyouts. Right to counsel. Strong code enforcement. And fair access. This is also our biggest piece. Fair access is removing discriminatory barriers to housing access, which means, like I told you before, everyone was impacted in the pandemic economically. So why do credit checks still exist, right? Like, we're pondering these things of getting rid of things that no longer serve us. And in that sense, credit checks no longer serve us. And other things, right? And so these are what we're fighting for in the county and city of LA. And we encourage you to fight them in your city as well. I know that Long Beach is gearing up for for something along these lines as well. Next slide, please. Okay, we've been able to win these things, some of these tenant bill of rights policies through the city of LA. And what we've been able to monumentally win, because our non-payment protection is, I believe, one of the top first in the nation. So you heard it, folks. Protections against eviction for non-payment of rent below 1 month fair market rent. Fair market rent rate is a formula that is dictated by either the state or the county, and approximately it goes by the number of bedrooms you have. So if you're in a 1-bedroom, it's estimated, I think, about 1,600 as a cap that you can owe, that still will not get you evicted. But when you go above that cap, you know, we're in danger. And so we're trying to probably push that up to 2 to 3 months fair market rate. But for now, this is still monumental, and we've been able to win it in the city of LA. We've also been able to win 2 other policies that are very important, which is relocation for non-RSO tenants displaced by large rent increases. So pretty much if you have a 10% rent increase, can't afford it, okay, I'm going to get relocation assistance and vacate in that sense, right? And 3, protections against evictions without cause, which are just cause protections, and they're near universal. Why do I say near universal? Because pretty much every tenant has just cause, except for the tenants that are in a small monthly lease. So if you have, if you've been in a place for less than 6 months, you are not covered. Because, or if you signed a lease that says I'm only staying there for 1 to 2 months, you're not covered, right? And really that came up because folks wanted to, you know, cover their vacation homes, etc. Really funny. But this is what we've been able to win, which is for say to help thousands of tenants. I'm over 100,000. So I'm not even gonna give you all a number and try to assume that, but over 100,000. And next slide, please. And I do have a call to action for you all today to support incorporated cities so that we can pass tenant bill of rights and policies like the ones that the city of LA has done. I know I don't have a slide in the county, but we've been able to win in the county also 3 things. But again, it does not impact incorporated cities, only unincorporated. And I know this is the difficult part of my job, trying to make sure that we distinguish those 2 things. But again, we're here for it, right? And so we've been able to win in the county RSO, which is rent stabilization ordinance, at 3% for unincorporated parts of LA. And it ends December of this year, 2023. So we're going to be going back to that. We've also won relocation assistance in the county, and we've also won Stay Housed LA, which is a program that provides legal assistance and resources to folks to become a permanent program. And so with that being said, that doesn't impact incorporated cities, and we want to impact incorporated cities. So please go ahead and use this bit.ly, which is a small link to that will send you directly to an email that you can send to the Board of Supervisors to really come through on their promise to provide incorporated cities resources to be able to pass a tenant bill of rights wherever they choose so, right? And so we want to keep that pressure up. And today I call on you to take action and to email the Board of Supervisors. And I also, if you don't know your board of supervisor, encourage you to look up your address and find that, right? But for now, for this purpose, that link will take you to all, that link will automatically email it to all of them. So just go ahead and put your little spice, experience, and sazon in there so that they can know you're a real person and these changes are needed. Next slide, please. I did mention stay housed. I cannot give all of this panel without letting you know that if you're in danger or if your family's in danger of being displaced, or someone you know and someone you love and care for is in danger of being displaced, or just wants to know their rights and would like that information, here is Stay Housed LA. If you're in Long Beach, you'll directly be connected to Libre, who also has a Stay Housed coordinator and or personnel. But for now, stayhousedla.org. You're able to sign up for workshops. After those workshops, you're able to speak to a legal service provider. And so please take a screenshot of this or save it because this has been a tremendous resource for folks. Next slide, please. Last but not least, I cannot leave this panel without saying you got resources. Now connect to those who want to fight alongside with you and who are on the ground, door knocking, getting to know their neighbors, talking about having a tenant journal to write in all your tenant experiences because that's necessary and also useful in court. But yeah, without further ado, these are amazing people on the ground that I want to shout out and I want to get you all connected to. I know Cerritos Community College is surrounded by many cities and is also in the city of Norwalk. So I'm going to go ahead and start off with giving a shout out to Norwalk Unides. You can find them on Facebook, Instagram, and their email is norwalkunides@gmail.com. And I love their name because y'all are just inclusive of everyone. Appreciate it. And I want to give right now a shout out to Irma Ramos, who is here in solidarity with you, from Norwalk Unides. So thank you, Irma, for being here. Really appreciate you. I'll give you a ding after I mention these three folks if you'd like to give us, a couple words. But Downey Tenants Union is also very active, and I was able to get an organizer's information for you all. So go ahead and screenshot this as well if you'd like, but you can find them on Facebook, on Instagram, and I've been able to get their email as well. And they do have a website. So if you'd like to check out that website, downeytenantsunion.com. Other folks that I connected with, but unsuccessfully, didn't get some information from them. But if you are willing to try and put in that effort, we have the Bellflower Tenants Union. And we also have, you can find on Facebook. And we also were able to connect with the Paramount Tenants Union, who you can find on Facebook, Instagram, and has an email. And with that being said, I encourage you to connect because there's a saying I like to hash out, and it's when tenants rise, cities thrive, because we really are, like I said, the essence of the city. And so when we thrive, we allow cities to thrive. With that being said, Irma, would you like to give us, I don't know, one or two words about Norwalk Unides?
Hi, thank you, thanks, Maria. Norwalk Unides, we're a resident-led organization working towards equity for every resident in Norwalk. And so we've just recently launched a campaign called Enough Evictions in Norwalk. Basically, we're fighting for everything that you mentioned: rent stabilization, just cause. And I'm going to link it in the chat so that people can join it. Basically, we do advocacy. So we're encouraging everyone to go and voice their opinions to our city council. We're a small city. We are incorporated. So we have to fight for those rights for ourselves, because You guys are doing amazing work, but it's not going to affect the city of Norwalk when you do pass those Bill of Rights. So we are concerned about the COVID evictions, COVID protections ending at the end of the month. We are a city that skews very conservative. And so there isn't that big of a voice. So we're trying to build a coalition so that us and the cities around us do have this voice that want to protect the everyday residents of Norwalk and not landowners. We face gentrification in our city. It's on the cusp. The developers have purchased lots of land around the city of Norwalk and even this major lawn space in the city of Norwalk by our city hall has been leased out to a developer to build mixed use housing. And we're fighting for them to make sure that they include more affordable housing because with the gentrification that this will bring, it's going to displace the everyday resident of Norwalk, which more than a third of Norwalk residents are renters and more than half of them are rent burdened. So I'm gonna go ahead and link our tiny URL or to our info sheet about what we're doing in terms of that. And hopefully some residents out there, and thank you Cerritos College, and thank you two ladies for all that work you do. Hopefully we could protect Norwalk as well. Okay, thanks Maria.
Yeah, thanks, Irma. Well, you heard it, folks. Your school is in Norwalk, and so I hope that you're able to hit the ground running, supporting Norwalk Unides, and really turn out to do public comment in any space, whether it's in the county, in your city, in the city of LA. I wouldn't say get comfortable in those spaces, but make sure you know who you are in those spaces, because those spaces you're always going to be in, that's where the fight is at. And so that's where we need to be and need to go to. And so I encourage you, if you can provide support today for the call to action email for incorporated cities, and if you're able to turn out for Norwalk, hey, you're about to get a whole lesson you don't get in school. And that's really, really, really powerful. Thanks, folks. That's it for me. Let's move into the unstructured Q&A.
Thank you, Maria, Mayra, and Irma for joining us, and Victoria and Jayani for leading that panel portion. We want to now open it up to see if anyone in the audience today has questions or even experiences that they'd like to share relating to housing struggles. Maybe to get things started, could we maybe hear from everyone in the chat? Where do you live? What city do you live in? We know we're all on Tongva land, right? But we all come from different cities. Sarah.
Hey, Professor.
Hey.
So I just wanted to say thank you to all of you ladies for coming on here and taking time of your day to shed a light on all these subjects that a lot of times we're not aware of and we don't tend to pay attention. And I'm talking about myself. You know, there's so many other things about life that we tend to pay attention and we lose focus of some things that are really affecting us at the end of the day. And hearing those statistics were mind-blowing, and it's crazy when you put numbers to it, it's like, whoa, okay, this is the big issue. And now I was actually a part of that statistic, of the students struggling. At one point, I wasn't in college because I'm a returning student, but I moved out in Huntington Beach, and it was definitely a struggle out there. As you guys can imagine, rent is a little more expensive, and I was roommating, but yeah, I know so many people too who are facing these financial struggles, and they can't afford to pay rent, and they don't know better, and they aren't aware of all these all these protection acts that are out there. And I'm so glad that I'm going to be able to share everything I've learned here today with all these other people who are living day by day, check by check. And I'm going to be able to help them in some way.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. Knowledge is definitely power, right? And the question is, what do we do with that power when we have it? How do we help our community? How do we share that with our friends and family, right? Along those lines, I had dropped earlier in the chat some links to Cerritos College resources that we offer, housing insecure students. We do have a partnership with Jóvenes, which is a nonprofit, and we do actually have limited housing available for unhoused students. And the Falcons Nest is also a great resource where you can find Jóvenes located, also provides all kinds of other basic needs support. So please access that, share that with your classmates. Because as those statistics showed us, right, like lots of our peers are struggling, and sometimes the challenge is we don't know where to ask for help, or we're nervous about asking for help, right? But that's where this element of community and all of us supporting each other really comes in. Was there anyone else that would like to share, ask a question, make a comment? Yeah, Victoria, you have another question?
Yes, I have a question. Right now what I'm seeing all over like my TikTok and on Instagram is and I'm sure everybody's aware of it, is the LAUSD teachers are protesting. And something that I saw was a lot of the teachers were like, I've debated, more than half of them, they're like, I've debated quitting because I don't make enough money to be able to live in like the communities where I teach. And it's not really a question, it's more of a comment, but I wanted to know what you guys think about that.
I think that movements need to connect, definitely, right? I did see right after our People Summit last week, I went onto the live where they declared their days of huelga, right? And I'm in total favor of teachers getting paid a livable wage. That's probably more than what they're asking for, right? And they deserve more than what they're asking for. But yeah, definitely, I think these movements need to connect. My team and I did send them the dates. Some of our comrades from the coalition, like Inner City Struggle, are on the picket lines as we speak, all of this week, or the 3 days that they're on. But it's really alarming that when our teachers who see our kids the most cannot pay rent, and to be honest, it's been happening for a long time. Teachers have been saying like, hey, I cannot pay my rent. I cannot afford my rent for a long time. And so I really do want to bring just recognition and honor to those fighting and doing that today, because it does take capacity. It does take a lot of belief and hope. And I hope that they win, to be honest. When we organize, we win. And if you haven't heard that, you'll come to believe it once you start organizing. But more on that note is just why we need rent control and why we need every form of rent control, right? If it is to be moved forward, like new housing should be not at the form of affordable that the state provides, but affordable that community dictates, you know? I think that's really key. I know that there was also a thought of housing teachers, but you know, like I love the idea. And all good ideas should be dissected either way. And why do I say that is because, is that housing going to also still be run by a landlord? Is it still going to be run by someone who takes that housing as a commodity? Right? And where is that rent money going to go? Is it going to go back to the institution to make it better? Is it going to go into the salary of that teacher? Et cetera, you know? So yes, teachers need housing, students need housing. We need to get more creative in the ways that we're able to provide this housing, keeping in mind not replicating a system that has already harmed our folks. That's the only thing. Myra, I don't know if you have some thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I just commented in the chat that all of this together, it's all just a huge domino effect. Someone shouldn't have to choose whether they pay their bills whether they pay their groceries or they pay for somewhere to live. And that is the reality that a lot of working class folks on top of teachers also those are some of the issues that folks in the city are facing, that sometimes having 2-3 jobs isn't enough to be able to pay your bills, and on top of that, afford where to live.
I saw this really cool quote. I think this was pre-pandemic, 2019, when teachers were also, organizing and gearing up. And it's like, and it's in Spanish, nuestros maestros, nuestras maestres nos enseñan, y nos enseñan a luchar. So it's like our teachers teach us, and then they also teach us how to, fight and resist. And so with that being said, like, it's happening right now. Folks who've been pondering going to the picket line, don't ponder it, just go.
Solidarity across movements, right? So important to understand these interconnections and how these struggles are actually interrelated. Thank you for that question, Victoria. It was a great question. Anyone else have any comments or questions that they'd like to share?
Or if you'd like to share your experience with folks, I think this is a safe space.
We know that
Maybe folks in the room. I don't know if someone's in the room.
that's right. We do have a viewing room. Will, I don't know if any participants that are there would like to share anything or ask anything. One student says we should hold another event like this. Amen, right? That's definitely, I think, one of my thoughts and takeaways is I'm sort of asking, where are the faculty, where are the staff, where are the administrators, where are the folks who have power to make decisions and to help our students? Where are they in trying to understand these issues? Of course, this event's being recorded and we will share that out, and I'm sure many folks will tap into this after the fact, but this is an ongoing issue, right? This is definitely not just something that we can talk about once and sort of move on. And that kind of brings me to some of my thoughts as far as what I'm taking away from all the things that you shared. We know that right now there's a big push in Cerritos, in the state of California, right, to build a lot more affordable housing. There's a lot of money on the table. And one of the latest sort of pushes is to have community colleges build housing, which, similar to you, Maria, I would say, housing is good and housing people is good. But I think the same kind of critical questions that you asked about what is the nature of that, where will profits go, et cetera, what are the securities there? In addition to the fact that we know that moving is considered one of the most stressful life events, right? And so for so many of our students, they don't want to move, right? They want to stay in place, and that's really what should be prioritized. And so while I think those efforts to build housing and provide housing to students is great, I also sort of wonder, knowing our students, will they be allowed to have their families there, right? Will they be allowed to practice their cultural traditions and have intergenerational households there, right? And those are the things that I have a feeling that the answer is no, right? Although we shall see. And so some of the two main takeaways that I have in terms of what we can do as a college is to, one, as a student suggested, right, hold more events like this to inform people about what's going on. And I think everyone will agree also to inspire us, right, that although the struggle is real, right, the struggle also helps get us wins, right? And that all the protections that you all have so valiantly fought for, and won were a result of that struggle. And so for all of us to kind of recognize that, value that, and throw our hats in the ring, right? And show up for each other and our community and contribute to that But in terms of the what else the campus can do, you mentioned folks struggle with having legal support, right? Because the number one goal, as we said, is to stay in place. And so when they are facing eviction or they are facing these challenges, I'm inspired by the Undocu Ally program that we have here at Cerritos College that for many years has actually brought an immigration attorney to campus to provide consult. And I personally know students who have been able to fight deportation as a result of this support. And so my call to action, I guess, to anyone on this call or listening to this recording is how can we get legal support for students who are facing housing insecurity to this campus, in addition to, as you both have shared, making sure that people know their rights, right? So providing basic know your rights workshops, which is a complex thing, as you mentioned, because every city is different and we have students that come from many different cities. But it seems to me that an institution as large as we are should be able to make that happen. Sarah, you had another comment.
Oh yes, I guess my last question. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go for it.
So now that all these that it's gonna end on March 30th, right? The protection for tenants. And I'm sure a lot of these relief programs for COVID are coming to an end now. Are you guys aware of any other I don't know, some other type of protection acts that they can resort to for the people that I know that are facing eviction?
I think the first thing to note is that you cannot be evicted for the COVID rent debt that you have. There is a repayment period, and folks should emphasize to the landlord that they have that repayment period of a year, depending on when they accrued that rent. If you go on keeplahouse.org, you'll be able to see all that information there in regards to rent debt payment timelines, and also in regards to the table of fair market rate rent, if you need that table numbers and stuff. But in regards to that, I guess like things that folks can fight evictions is if you're getting harassed, make sure you write it in a letter to stop harassment. At the end of the day, you could prove that letter or that eviction came after that letter, and hence it's retaliation. And so they could have a standing fight in court to stay in place for a short period of time until the landlord opens up another unlawful detainer, which is the legal name for an eviction. Summons to an unlawful detainer is the paperwork you get. I think that if you can't pay rent, you should definitely, there is a high possibility that you could get a notice, but not, guaranteed that you'll get a notice, because maybe your landlord is like, oh, we'll add it to your debt, and this is the payment plan we have, or you're able to work out a payment plan, right? Et cetera, et cetera. But there is a high probability that you could get a notice. If you're able to get that rent money a couple days late, I would still say send the landlord a notice when your rent is due, and let them know that you will be paying late. I know that there's a lot of GoFundMe opportunities right now happening. We're able, as the Long Beach Tenants Union, to get a BIPOC housing fund GoFundMe page open at one point, and we gathered over $5,000 to help some tenants that were really close to us, directly organizing those funds, right? So when you do organize, you're able to put efforts together to keep people housed as well, in a very small but meaningful way. And again, I would say brace yourself and get to know your rights and talk to a legal expert if you're worried that you can't pay your rent come April 1st.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Sarah, also check out the chat. Maida provided a little bit more detail in terms of what Maria was referencing for any debt accrued during the official COVID period, right? March 2020 to March 2023. Tenants cannot be forced to pay this immediately. Technically, you have until April 2024 before you're forced to pay it back. And so there's some wiggle room here, and there's time to struggle and organize, right? As well to extend these protections. Any other comments or questions today?
This is a source of inspiration, but as we were here on this panel, the city of Maywood won to extend their rent freeze. And so again, folks, when we organize, we win.
Excellent. Great. So there is hope, right? There's hope in community for sure. And so I hope that although we, as we said, the struggle is real, that we can turn to one another and organize for these victories. Definitely, as the student has suggested, and I know we had already kind of chatted about putting together some kind of Know Your Rights event for the Cerritos College campus. And so everyone who's participating today, please look out, right, for those announcements wherever you heard about this event, which a lot of you is from me as your instructor. Stay connected so that we can update you. And then, knowing how big of an issue this is, please share that information with as many people as you can, right? Because we definitely need more people to be informed, aware, connected, right, to these issues. And with that, I really can't thank you enough, Maida, Maria, everyone behind the scenes, Silvana, Andre, right? I know lots of people were working behind the scenes to make this happen. And you have really provided invaluable resources, context, and hope, I think, for everyone who's participated today. So with that, I wish you all good health and take care, and be safe. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, folks.
Bye. Thank you. Have a blessed day.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.